for me, I needed a masculine, hard, truth-telling confessor. And after some time I found one, and once I did, I was always looking for him, and always in that confessional box. I would look for his name. Was all right, fair enough, let's go there. I mean, Saint Benedict is saying it's a battle of obedience, and part of that obedience is it's hard. It's hard, it's grinding, but it's worth it, just like lifting. One of the big things that I did, one of the longest disciplines I had, like you, is weightlifting. And that's given me the core of discipline to even start the process. And I've reflected a lot on, just that step alone.
Joining me today for another episode of No Nose Talks to Bros is Rich. Rich, thanks for being willing to share your story. How are you doing?
No, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a few things in the email, and I think people would love to hear what you have to say. A guy who's turned his life around, and in particular, what that really involved, some of the struggles, and some, in hindsight, reflections on this process that might help other people. So
Yeah.
tell me a bit about why I wanted to call in.
I wanted to call in basically to help other guys because I started super, super late. So I got married at 36. And then again, as a Catholic, we had a secular wedding, and then I got married again as a Catholic, 5 years ago only. So I married the same woman twice, and it's a funny story when you're on conference calls with clients and stuff to say something like that, because everybody scratches their head. What do you mean you married the same woman twice? And they think all these different things, and I say, well, I got married. I had a secular wedding, and then kind of corrected that by getting everything right with the church and being 2 feet in, and having a sacrament in front of God, which was very, very important to me. And now it's become important to my wife as well. So that's been, correcting, just little steps like that, correcting issues that you have. So one of the big things that I did, one of the longest disciplines I had, like you, is weightlifting. And that's given me the core of discipline to even start the process. And I've reflected a lot on, just that step alone. So when did you get into weightlifting?
Oh, I'm 37 now, and probably around like age 20 or so,
Okay.
2021.
Same here. Yeah, so I'm 43 now, and I'm married. I have two kids, and I got into it 23 years ago. It'll be like 24 years this upcoming year. And thankfully, at the time, sometimes you have the right friends for some reasons and the wrong friends for other reasons too. They could help push you in a correct direction, and also push you in a incorrect direction. I had a buddy of mine, and this is kind of part of the formation, that discipline of weightlifting, because I never looked back. Um, he kind of said to me one day, "Hey man, what are you doing?" Just gave me a gut check, a shaming gut check of being, 20, overweight, like not overweight, like, big, but I was probably like 185 pounds and soft. I'd never lifted a weight in my entire life. And having that gut check, and then a friend to say, hey, the road you're heading down is not a good road right now, with, physically or health wise. And I remember he took me to the gym, signed me up that day. I didn't want to do it, but got in the car, did it, and I started there. And that's part of the discipline too. Is with that weightlifting, I just started. I started like as not knowing. I didn't own a pair of running shoes. I didn't own gym shoes. He was like, all right, grab your gym shoes. I was like, well, I have walking shoes. And it was one of those crickets. Like, hey man, you gotta get some shoes.
Hmm.
But I started out, and as advice to other men too, whenever you start, it doesn't matter if it's, 20 and or you start at 30 or something like that. You have to start. That's one of the keys, I think, is just getting going, because it was embarrassing to be there at first because I'm getting under, I was scared to get under a bar,
Hmm.
because I'm young, I haven't worked out before. I didn't know what I was doing. So I grabbed dumbbells and I'm pushing up the 20-pound dumbbells and doing sit-ups and learning along the way. But, just building that discipline and then making it, one day and then 5 days and then a couple weeks. And then, you see some results, and then you start to grind. And that you start to grind after numerous years, it becomes more of a discipline and not of I get results, I have a good feeling about it, or I'm impressing others. It just becomes part of what you do. This is what you just do Monday through Friday, or whatever you do, your schedule. So, that, at least having that base for me was a good discipline to start. And I've always been, I was raised Catholic, kind of to change the trajectory. But I was brought up in that Novus Ordo church, and it was pretty hands off, with being brought up. My parents were involved. My mom went to church, took us to church, all that good stuff. But as far as being catechized, man, I didn't get catechized at all. Zero, like pretty much 0% on the catechesis side of the house. So I didn't know anything about that. Zero. So coming out of it, like thinking about it, reflecting on it, first having that, the 23 years of discipline, and then starting to get back into, what's my religion? What's this tradition? Is it all true? That's a big deal. Like starting to seek if it's true. And, I would go to mass. I started reattending mass probably at like 26, but I lived a different way, Monday through that 1 hour on Sunday, completely different. So it was, kind of like, I don't know what I was doing, just drifting along aimlessly. And changed things started to change once I met my wife. And I think that's a big deal for other guys too. And it doesn't take a woman, right, to do that things, but sometimes it does. And sometimes when you find a woman that, maybe, starts out like, right, you're attracted to, or you want to talk to, and things progress from there.
Couple of really interesting remarks in what you said. So going to the gym at first, really difficult just to get it started. And some guys feel that way about going to church for the first time as well, or maybe trying to integrate prayer into their daily routine, or maybe going to confession for the first time. But your message there was that whatever you do, just take the first step and build that momentum. Don't put it off.
Yeah, just like that first gym experience of my buddy saying, "Hey, you got to get it together," and then we got in the car and drove there. Right. It was that same day. It was all in the same instant. The same thing goes for going to mass, right? It's just taking that, and you feel like, I remember going to mass, and I felt like a fraud in mass, and like that's fair enough. I was a fraud. I was living very different than the way the church teaches to live. I was living by society's standards of what a model behavior should be, and not what the church says model behavior should be. And then, as you alluded to, going to confession. I remember I made that first real confession, man, probably like 28 years old. And then I've made other, very serious, real confessions when I, discovered that stuff was awry in my life. Um, and I said in my email too, is, one of the topics I wanted to talk about as well taking those first steps, and then, getting in that line for the confessional, and then just having a good honest confession, to kick things off. Because when you have that reflection, and then you put it out there to the priest who is acting as Christ, that's a big deal, and it takes a lot off. And it's something that our religion gives, that I don't know how many other religions do that, where you can just almost take the baggage off and say, I'm gonna mend my ways and move on.
What was going through your mind when you weren't going to confession? Did you feel like you should go, but you had something holding you back? What was it like taking the first step and making that first serious one?
I always had a sense that I needed to go, but it was, what's the priest going to say? You don't know. And this I learned about confession too, that, not all priests on the other side of that box are the same. So that's a big deal, because I've had those confessions too, where it's, well, I've heard it all. Well, the church doesn't really, teach that as much anymore. Or they were just thank me for coming into the box. And I'm not talking about the first couple of times. I'm talking about, after I went a couple of times, and then I started to really seek out, for me, I needed a masculine, hard, truth-telling confessor. And after some time I found one, and once I did, I was always looking for him, and always in that confessional box. I would look for his name. Was all right, fair enough, let's go there. And I did quite a bit of that, because talking about confession, on the side of, on the other side of it, you want somebody, you want another man to tell you, what you're doing, you can't do this anymore. This is not the right way to live, and this is why, and give you clear guidance of, you can't do this at all. And that's a big deal. And I remember one time, you're going to ask me a question. I remember one time, speaking about confession, a great confessor kind of withheld. He was like, I can't do it. I'm going to have to withhold absolution unless you make a commitment not to do this again. And I was like, that wakes you up when you're on the other side. Like, okay. So that changed things right there on the spot. Things started to change.
So the stricter the response, the more it benefited you. You were craving that rigidity and the rules that you mentioned. You never really got catechized, and having the law laid down like that, that's what you were seeking.
Seeking it so much. So, like weightlifting comes with its own set of rules and guidelines, and you build upon that. If you want to weightlift well, you don't really go out drinking the night before. You don't do a lot of those things, and you start to build it into your routine, right? You have a job. Okay, I got to get my workout in. Maybe get it in before work, maybe get it in after work, but you don't want to feel terrible during that. So there's a set of guidelines that you follow in discipline in the gym. And once I discovered that, our religion had the same set of guidelines, like really, grindingly tough guidelines, which are also freeing in a way, definitely freeing, but that same guidelines, it's something that I started to really seek out. And that is what brought me really back into the church, was starting to, play by the rules, live by the rules, and then find out, you make discoveries along the way as you're reading things. I've read sermons of St. Alphonse Liguori, and I don't know if you've ever read those before. Have you?
Yeah, like the last is the widest gate to hell, the one that most guys fall into. That's why I talk about sexual morality so much, because that's true. For most men, that's the biggest cause of most of the things that go wrong in their lives. So
I couldn't agree
it's
more.
true that, like, fraud, and there are worse sins than lust, but you're not so likely to be involved in like high level white collar crime and deception and fraud, lust is the one that for most guys is where it's at. And it's all the more dangerous because the culture basically tells you it's okay.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well too. And speak on lust. Same like most guys listening to this, big struggle of mine. Still, I mean, still a big struggle of mine. And I put on blinders. I literally try to put on blinders if I go to the gym, places like I just I can't do it. Like I can't do it. So, and same thing with advertising. It's always there. It's always in your face, and it makes it tougher. It makes it quite tougher.
Yep, that's it. That's the struggle that so many men have to face. You mentioned that you were married at 36. I
Yeah.
often get asked questions saying, I'm mid 30s now. Have I left it too late to get married? And my response is, no, of course you haven't, but you've done it. What's your thoughts about that?
Right. Yeah, I've done it, and I did it twice. I did it secular, and I did it, in Catholic marriage. So, um, why are you not? Go find a good woman and maybe meet her through church and get going. Like, I mean, I got married at 36. Granted, I met her before, right? So I've known my wife now, I think for, I don't know, 11 years or something like that. So we met before, but I'm 32 or something when
Mm.
we first met. And why wouldn't you get married at 36? So I would say that to other guys. And sometimes that's what other guys need too. I'm not saying like, hey, just go marry the first woman you meet. And obviously find the right reasons, and hopefully you're checking a bunch of boxes and she's checking some boxes too on your end, and she should be. Um, but yeah, 36, I got married, and I was definitely older, and it makes things different too, because now I have two young ones, which is great. My wife is she's 11 years younger, so that's how the math works out on that one. Um, yeah, so I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, and it's awesome. It's
Yeah,
so
I bet.
awesome. It's it's a lot, but it's the best. Like, I wouldn't want it any other way. And just advice to other guys. Yeah. Well, I'm 32. Like, good for you. Like, go start to get it together, get to church, go get your value system correct. Um, that's what I would suggest. The other thing I wanted to bring up, just for men and for guys, and I don't. So I spent a lot of time in the Nova Soto church, a lot of time. And sometimes, my wife will say, hey, do you want to go? And we'll go together to a Nova Soto parish. But I found, as a guy, and a guy who, enjoys the discipline of it, I started seeking out, after, quite a few Nova Soto, I mean, years and years and years of those masses. I remember this was one time I was there in the church, and I was kind of checking the box, right? And it was a 5 o'clock mass, and they had a jazz band. And I remember I was like, there's got to be more than this. Like, it was a bad jazz band, and it didn't feel strong. You know what I mean? It didn't feel like that would be something that God would want. And I'm not, yeah, I am. Actually, you know what I am saying? Like, it's probably not the right place. And that's when I started seeking out. It's like, all right, let me find a traditional parish. And so I did. And I started, Google's great, and you have a car, and you can get places, and you don't have to go where you have to go. You can if you want to, and you could change that parish, but I sought it out, and I found a parish in Chicago, St. John Cantius, and they offered the Latin Mass, and I was like, all right, let me see what this is about. And I remember walking into there nervous as heck. And then, once I did it a couple of times, I started to learn the mass. It made a lot of sense. And that's where I found that my confessor too was in tradition, in a very kind of stricter order, I guess you could say.
Yeah, you often hear from more masculine guys that the TLM appeals to them much more because you've got that sense of gravity and it tends to be stricter in the way you've described. So that for you made a big difference, making the extra effort to do the drive. You found the
Mhm.
right place.
And I mean, even now, like we live out in the suburbs, so my drive is even much different now because my closest TLM now is every Sunday is 35 minutes. Two kids, getting them ready. Kind of from us leaving the driveway to actually walking inside the church is 35 minutes, and then the other one that's not too far away is an hour. And that's also a big commitment that comes back to weightlifting and how important this is, how important the worship of God is, and the sacrament and the Eucharist. And I don't know if you gone to traditional masses before, or do you attend now?
Yeah, so we've found one which isn't too far away from us. It's a bit over an hour, I think. And that took a long time to find because there's just not really much in the area. In the UK, they're very, very few and far between. So my kids are currently doing their confirmation classes at the local church. But when we get to the end of that, we'll be going to the TLM one more regularly. I think it's worth the extra effort.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's 100% worth the extra effort. And then I've heard a lot of guys on your show too talk about. Um, I understand like the seeking, like when you go to a lot of these other masses, it seems like there's less reverence, right, when it comes to a lot of things, and then you see, you know, there's more. Especially here by me in those masses, there's a lot more white hair. There's sparsity. There's not many children in a lot of those masses too. And then you go to a traditional parish, and I've noticed this quite a bit. And I've gone to traditional parishes, in Florida and Nebraska. I figure them out when we travel and go on vacation, and they're always shoulder to shoulder, and a lot of younger people, and I think that's something as well to hang your hat on. Is stay, this is probably, and I don't know if this is where you want to take the conversation. That's probably where the church is headed, because I mean, when I go to those churches, the average family is five, not like five, and I'm five children.
Mm.
You know, I look like I got nothing.
If the church isn't crying, it's dying, isn't it? You want lots of kids in the
Yeah.
congregation. That's what's important. So I think you're right there that there's an indication that people are seeking out a richer connection with the tradition, the way things used to be. The other point I wanted to raise was that you're pretty unusual in having been married to the same woman twice. And so many guys think, why do we need to get married at all? It's just a piece of paper. If you weren't even happy with just the piece of paper, though, you wanted to get the full sacramental marriage. You wanted to make the point of doing it the right way after you realized that there was something missing. So, what did that mean to you?
It just, thanks to a good confessor as well, of letting him know where I was. And I said, hey, I had this secular wedding, and he let me know, you need to regularize this. And then not only do you need to make it right, you also need to you should probably think about abstaining until you go make it right. And then when somebody takes something that serious and it's given to you in such a serious manner, you think about it. All right, this is, I need to make right with God. And that's one of those big things is, okay, God instituted marriage, and let's let's make it right. So I talked to my wife at the time, and she said, let's go in front, in front of God, and have a sacramental marriage. And so we did. So my witnesses in both weddings were the same, which is great because they're very strong Catholic couple, and they've been good inspiration to my wife and I. So that was really nice. And just starting to take all those tiny little steps that you need to, and it seems like a big pain, right? Oh, why would I got sacramentally married? Why do I even need to get married in the first place? But it makes a big deal because you're under God. And my wife and I both know that, our marriage was in front of God and in front of the priest and in front of our witnesses. And we've made, a big commitment. And not only is it a big commitment to us, it's a big commitment to our children and family. And it's a really big deal. I'm probably not articulating that correctly. So
No, that's great. So it's about treating it with the reverence and dignity that it deserves because of what a serious commitment it is. And it's not just a civil union, it goes beyond that. It's something that you need to, as you put it, get right before God. That makes total sense.
it's generational. Because you have to think about it this way too, especially for younger guys, that it's not just, you're not just doing this for you for some wackadoo selfish reason. You're doing it, for the other person, for God, and then for the future generations. So it all gets tied together.
And given that marriage is a sacrament, you're actually receiving God's help to fulfill your duties as a parent as well, and to get the grace to bear with each other's flaws as well, as you and your wife help each other progress in your spiritual life. So the sacrament actually does something as well. It's not just going through the motions, it helps you.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, and I just celebrated, my fifth wedding anniversary within the church on December 1st, and I reflected on it, and I wrote my wife a note. We went out to dinner and all that good stuff. But I was really thinking about it. It also gives you the graces to go through hard times too, because no one's going to say that there's not hard times. Like that's part of like what marriage is, and it's there's pick up that cross, and St. Paul says, goes on that passage, and you are to die, essentially for your wife, and suffer. That's a big commitment, and having that reflection on it, and Catholicism and the tradition is, everything's not roses and good feelings all the time. Like, there's a lot of doing things and going through the motions, and disappointments and sicknesses and suffering and worrying and everything that goes along with it. But I have that foundation of, us honoring our marriage under God, and the honoring of each other, which is another big deal, because you're honoring God, but you're honoring that other person as well in your sacramental marriage, and then honoring your children as well in that sacramental marriage, which is a big deal.
That's it. And people who think of love as just a feeling that you can fall into or fall out of have really misunderstood what it's about, because it's willpower. It's about a commitment and doing it every day. And that's the promise at the heart of it, that each day you'll keep this thing moving, you'll keep it going. And people who just want to treat it lightly, that ultimately ends in divorce, doesn't it? When the feeling goes, then the effort goes and they walk away from it. So what you're saying here about the vision of what married life really involves and doing it for more than just yourself, for God, family, and future generations, I think that's the right emphasis. So it's good that you come around to taking that view. And I think guys can learn a lot from this. But was there ever a point where you felt that you were too far gone and you weren't going to be able to turn things around?
Yeah, I haven't reflected on that much. I mean, I'm sure there was, many points that I may have felt like that, like along the way in my 20s and such, but I haven't spent a lot of time reflecting on that particular question. And I probably don't need to because those times have passed. So
Yeah,
that already happened. So I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I also know for a fact that there's probably dozens of those times where it was, I wasn't sure.
yeah,
But luckily, I got grace and starting to take responsibility for everything, right? As I think also in your show, like what a lot of guys need to do, because also I was thinking about this as well, is being, you know, a husband, a father, a protector, like it's all in your responsibility. Like it's all upon your shoulders. It's on my shoulders, it's on your shoulders, to take care of the family, to protect them, to be a good father, to do your duties, and lovingly do your duties and patiently do your duties for God's sake. And I always want to backtrack one thing as back to marriage is I think my wife and we now have a mature view of what marriage is and a mature view of what marriage isn't. And I think that's a big deal of us being on the same page, with our commitment to our marriage and a commitment to our family, and making it all the way.
So what are some of the new insights that you've gained with experience into what marriage is really about then? If your understanding of it, your wife's understanding of it has developed over the years, is there anything that you'd tell yourself from back then? One or two things?
Don't be impatient. I mean, I think that's a big one. When you first get married, I feel like my impatience, it's easy to be quick to anger, quick to be impatient, quick to be, lustful when you shouldn't be. A lot of those big ticket items. I would tell myself to, but again, I had to go through all those things and find out they're all correctable faults
Mm.
to be able to say that in the first place. And I think for any guys that are married or, maybe just got married, listening to your channel and having kids, I'll share a funny story. I was having like a little bit of difficulty with my job, and then it was turning around, right? And I wanted some sort of, approval from the bosses of, hey, you turned it around. And my wife said to me, your boss is not going to call you up to say good job, but for doing your job. And then I've spent a lot of time reflecting on that one statement that she said. And in marriage, you help each other also grow in grace and virtue. And that's something that she didn't know when she said it. And I've told her numerous times, but it's helped me quite a bit. Just like that mindset of, hey, it's not his job to tell you that good job, you're doing your job. And it's not your wife's job to say, hey, good job, good husband, you're taking care of the family, or I wrote this down because I wanted to share it. Or it's not someone telling you, hey man, you look strong, you're lifting hard at the gym, or oh great, you're fasting, thanks for fasting. Like, what we do is in our roles as men too, it's a thankless job, but God knows you're doing it. And I don't feel having that mindset change of not having to be thanked to do what your duty is, that was a big deal. And upon reflecting, though, I would say that was something that she said to me that I've taken to heart and understand. So when you're, as you were alluding to, like you're emptying the dishwasher, you don't want to be, but she's in the third trimester of a pregnancy. Just go do it. Just go do it. And there's a lot of that quiet stuff that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah, needing to be motivated by praise the whole time is kind of a boyish trait. And I think you're very wise there in saying that part of becoming a man is just doing your duty, even when you're not going to be thanked for it. Like you don't need to get a pat on the back for reading your kids a story or helping your wife around the house. That's just expected. So hopefully people have really taken that to heart.
Or going to confession, same thing. You don't need to like the last thing I want to hear is a priest telling me thank you. Like I'm there to thank the priest for being on the other side of that confessional. So
Right, right.
I'll just add that part.
Yeah, important emphasis. So some of the particular habits then that you changed. So things that were different after you found this really strict confessor. A lot of guys ask about how to implement things into their daily routine. What kind of changes do you think have made the biggest difference to you? This might be something like what you do for prayer. It might be the kind of books you like to read or habits. I get this kind of question a lot. So I think it'd be interesting to hear whether you found anything helpful.
I've found so much of it helpful. Um, so coming into tradition, that helped a lot, and I think also reading myself into the church helped a lot. So I started reading the Bible, and I got the traditional Bible, like I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, so maybe you could help me out here. The Douay Reims.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I bought that Bible, so you know translated pretty appropriately and not leaving too much text out. So reading the Bible, I do that every day. Actually, no, I'm not being 100% truthful. I do that Monday through Friday. I wake up at 5:30 a.m. and I say a set of prayers. I say the Our Father, I say the Saint Michael, a couple other prayers before I even have coffee, and then sit down, read the Bible for probably like 20, 25 minutes. And then I go on, I do some self-education. I have some Latin lessons that I do. Um, and then the kids start to rouse and things get going. But every single morning I do that. So I wake up early on purpose to have that quiet time before the house gets going. Because once the house gets going, then you know how it is. That's it. You have a small window to do something, to have a little bit of quiet time.
It's busy for sure. That's interesting. So a little bit every day during the week adds up over time. That's a little bit like getting your workouts in, isn't it? People say, how do you find the time to train sometimes? Well, you have to be consistent and find something that's manageable and fits in with your schedule. But if you keep it going for long enough, then it all adds up in the end. And your approach of reading the Bible for 20, 25 minutes a day, you'll get through the whole thing multiple times if you keep that going for enough years.
Yeah, I'm on my second run.
There we
'Cause I
go.
finished it. Yeah, I made a goal to do it, through and through the first time. So I just did the math and I just figured it out what it was going to be. So I did it, and then I ended. I was like, all right, I'll probably read Lord of the Rings now, and then it's after you read the Bible and you read, especially reading Kings, and how do you not read it? It's the greatest story. I would recommend it to any guys listening to your channel. Just go pick up that exact copy, and you could buy it for under $50. You get a nice copy for under $50 and just make that dedication to just go do it. And if you read 4.8 pages a day, you can get there in a little bit over a year.
And then, like you said, you'll probably want to go back to the beginning and start again. And this doesn't require any kind of special heroics on any given day. It's just about sticking to a plan and then letting it build over time. I think that in itself teaches some really important lessons about discipline and consistency, because it's no good if you start trying to read it for hours a day and then after the first week you're burnt out. You need to get that moderation and doing something that you can actually make a part of your life. On my recommended reading list on Substack, there's a whole bunch of stuff that might help people with individual problems. But in the summary I did of Lacordaire's advice to young men for reading, he just says, look, if you read the Bible and you read some Aquinas as well, and that's all you ever read, you're going to outdo the guy who is reading lots of minor stuff. So don't major in the minors. It's a bit like if you're going to the gym. If you spend your whole time tossing pink dumbbells around rather than working hard on the basics, then you might feel like you're in there busy the whole time, but you're not really working on what matters. So you, with your 20, 25 minutes of Bible reading every day, that's like the guy who goes to the gym and he does his squats, deadlifts, bench press, does the big basic movements, and then keeps that going for a long time. That's how a man trains. And then this is how a man reads as well, because it fits into your life and it gives you the best benefit.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that you make is, same thing with the gym. If you want to get to the gym, and you know this better than anybody, I can get in and out of the gym, like full workout, 25 minutes out. And this, just doing deadlifts, doing rows, doing some pull-ups, getting all the sets in and out. I'm out the door, gone. I did abs too, and I'm gone. I see other guys as well, and they'll be on their phones and hanging out, and and I mean, hey, I have those days too, where I see a buddy and we catch up on whatever it might be. But if you want to do it, you just put your hours in, or not even your hours. You put your time in, and then get it done. And the Bible's the same way. Prayer is the same way. I made that commitment 7 years ago or 8 years ago now, and I pray the prayers of you ever hear of the Sensus Fidelium and the Alexium Castrorum? Those prayers, I do those every single day, and I've done them without fail for 8 years now straight. I think I missed one day, and that was it. I didn't even miss the whole day. I just missed the closing prayer, and that was an accident.
Right. That's
But just
impressive.
that tiny bit of labor goes a really long way, because it's just a tiny bit.
Yep, you're right.
And the tiny bit of self-denial goes a long way too. I do this prayer before I touch coffee. I start praying. I don't have a cup of coffee. I don't do anything else until I do this.
You get the days right, and then the weeks take care of themselves, then the months, and then the years. There's that line, isn't there, in the Bible about sufficient to the day is the evil thereof. So we just have to live day by day. Ultimately, that's how life comes at us. But the problem is that lots of people get lost in the past or the future and have all kinds of extra anxieties going through their minds, when really what you have to do is deal with what is right in front of you. And if that involves today, your bit of reading or your prayer, and you get that right, because you can do it today, just like you can get your feet out of the door and get a workout in when you're supposed to. You just keep that going for long enough and you achieve something extraordinary. I like how this is a big part of the message that you've been getting across today.
Yeah, I think that's the key to everything. Just do those sets with reading, sets with working out, sets with being a father, sets, I mean, even your sets with the wife, and checking off all those boxes, like not in a utility way, but in a genuine way. I don't check those boxes off just as a utility because like God's a utility. I think that's a big deal. I check it off because fear of the Lord and love the Lord, right? And check those boxes off for both of those things. the other.
Yeah, it's a common misconception that religion is mainly about feelings and it's kind of squishy or woolly, but really it's about something that we owe to God in justice. And if more men understood that this is fundamentally about justice and doing our duty, and that our whole lives are shot through with this, whether as husbands or as fathers, or ultimately as creatures worshipping our creator, then I think it would help them to get a more masculine understanding of what religion's really about, and Catholicism in particular.
It's very masculine. I mean, you know that. I know that. A lot of us in the traditional church know that it's very and it's not masculine. And you've talked about this in that false machismo way that the world teaches or you see on TV. It's masculine as in carrying your cross, and then you end up loving that cross. If in marriage, right? If your wife is suffering, those are hard times. There's tough weeks, whatever it might be, or tough months. Like, and you come out of that and you grinded it out together, and you're bonded even more, and you're stronger, and she knows you're stronger, and she's stronger because of that situation. You got through quite a bit together.
That's it. So suffering and hardship, to come back to the point that you opened today with, are a bit like your workouts in the gym, in that no pressure, no diamond, taking on these responsibilities, doing your duty, seeing it through the hard times. That all helps to form you as a man, as a husband, as a father.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing. I know we're kind of up on time, but one thing that's also helped, and maybe we could talk about this on a different time, is fasting. And that's something I've noticed that also kind of brought me back, was that discipline of just starting to observe the fast. And that started on Friday, and then got a little bit more serious on Fridays, and started on Wednesdays, and now has become pretty much a grind, and a good grind, because you grind in the right way, and then you end up putting a lot of vices away during the fasting periods, and that they don't magically disappear, but because you're managing fasting properly, and you're fasting for the right reasons, those vices start to get put in the right places, and then you could manage them appropriately, like anger or impatience or lust. It fixes a lot of those problems, I found. And
Yeah,
I think a lot of people agree.
let's hear a bit more about that, because not many guys do it. Dr. Robillard, who you might have seen on the book club weekly shows with me, he's just done a 3.5 day water fast, and he found it really beneficial for some of the reasons that you've outlined there. We've got this idea now that it's somehow alpha to do whatever your impulses tell you. So you see a girl, you want to sleep with her, well, that's alpha, bro. And self-restraint is somehow emasculating, but really it's the indulgence and always having to give in to every little thing that you feel, or look at every little thing you want to look at. That's what weakens you. And fasting is saying, I'm in control, and I have the strength to impose through the discipline of my will this extra demand. And if I can stick to this, I'm going to strengthen myself. And therefore, when it gets back to normal life, I'll find it easier. I'll be better trained. I can deal with whatever comes my way. A bit like
Yep.
if you are running uphill and you're wearing a weighted vest or something. Well, if you can do that, then when you have to face that hill with no vest on, it's going to feel easier, right?
And the same thing is for fasting. And I started in about 2014 fasting, and just simple, right? I'd skip breakfast. I'd abstain from meat, which changes things a little bit as well on Fridays, because culture says, hey, if you get invited to dinner, I don't not accept food on those days, like if somebody prepared a meal and it happened to be a meat dish. But if I could avoid on purpose, then I will do that. I'll make that commitment. But I began just by doing that one simple step of just, all right, I'm just gonna 100% abstain from meat every single Friday going forward, not just Lent, not just period. I'm going to abstain from meat, and then I'm going to abstain from, skip breakfast, and I'll skip lunch, and then I'll just have some sort of fish or whatever it might be for dinner. And I remember one of the big steps that I took was I stopped eating and snacking between meals just during the week. Just quit. No more. Don't eat between meals, period. And it sounds like, oh, that's kind of extreme, but hey, that makes a difference when you start to get that one little tiny impulse of your gut in check, of like not picking up and feeding that impulse like you were talking about, because it regulates other areas of your life too, where you get that impulse control of, all right, well, I'm not going to snack. And like, what does that mean sometimes? It means, hey, if you're going to go hang out with a buddy and there's a bag of chips around the campfire, you're not going to stick your hands into that bag of chips. And you're going to also build more virtue by not sticking your hands into that bag of chips when you're around the campfire with a bunch of friends talking. I just started fasting on Fridays, and then I implemented Wednesdays, and then I made a big fast one Lent where I gave up meat and cheese, which, hey, that's tough. Not eating meat and cheese for Lent. And I mean, like, by Lent, I mean including Sundays. Like, I'm not cheating on Sundays. Um, and I felt like a hero. And then, man, after day 10, it was a grind. It was a grueling, grueling grind. But I had the best bacon grilled cheese sandwich ever on Easter Sunday. But yeah, I'd suggest other guys just start on Fridays, follow the discipline, look it up. It's in our tradition. It's in the church. Like, don't take my word for it. Don't take your word for it. Like, go look up what's always been, a tradition, and not just through Lent, like every single Friday for the entire year, the whole year. So, and then that makes it regulates. I remember, I'd have like weird dreams and stuff on those longer fast days, because I usually do it. Maybe some of your listeners will think this is crazy, but I'll do on Wednesdays now for probably, man, oh man, probably 2 years now. I just abstain completely. So I just do water fast Tuesday evening, and then I'm on water fast and black coffee through sometime Thursday afternoon. And I'll do that fast all the time. And I learned, and you could share this as well, share this with other people just in case they do it. You have to watch your salt intake. So, I kind of learned that about myself, accidentally going to the doctor and they're like, your sodium's low. And that fixed my sleeping and my dreams, because my sodium was a little bit too low. But I've learned you can work out on it. You can go jogging. I've run in the morning, lifted weights, and gone for a swim in the evening. Perfectly fine. Zero, like no energy loss because of it every single week. And it's also fasting for the right reason. I think that's the other part. Early on in my fast, I fasted for other reasons. I was fasting for other people. I think fasting for the right reason becomes also critical, and it helps you evaluate yourself, because you're on they're long fasts every week for 2 years of 40 some odd hours. You learn something about yourself, and you learn when you're edgy. And I noticed that with the children a couple mornings is back when I first started those long fasts, I'd be a little bit impatient that Thursday morning, but you learn it, you figure it out, and you fix that little vice, and then it fixes your patience on non-fast days.
That's it. Yeah. And it's a bit like putting a magnifying glass on things. So when I get hungry, like most people, I'm much more quick-tempered and irritable. And if you can learn to anticipate that, recognize it, and control it, then it just helps you in normal life as well, because you've confronted yourself, magnified, and you've been able to overcome it. So it's less of a challenge to do it normally. So you do find out unpleasant things about yourself, but really they're already there. You just might not have noticed them. You needed the volume turned up a bit to see
Yeah.
where the problems are.
Yeah. Fasting does that. Same thing with a good confessor does that. He amplifies, a good confessor will amplify those issues and ask you the right questions. Oh, how long have you been committing this sin? And you have to spit it out. Did you receive the sacrament during that time? That's a big deal. So I think that amplification is spot on about fasting. And then, also kind of reverting back is finding that right confessor. You want somebody to amplify and tell you what's going on, so then you could start doing the work of correcting, because everybody benefits when you do that. It's, as the husband, your wife benefits when you correct those issues, your children benefit, and then in a whole, like, it affects your tiny little realm of people that surround you, because they see that you've corrected some issues. They might not say anything, but they'll see it and they take note. Wife, children, family, parents, everybody starts to take note around you as well. And when you live like that, it makes a difference. Because people ask me, I used to, not to go off on a tangent, I apologize, but they used to ask, like, hey, what are you doing? Or how was your weekends? And I would say, essentially nothing, or we did this. And I'd leave out the church part, or I'd leave out some of that. I don't leave that stuff out anymore. Because I've learned that when you say you've been doing this, like, hey, yeah, I take a long drive. We go to traditional Latin mass. People are genuinely interested, and they want to hear more, because they don't know a lot of people that live like that. And I think doing those, in our tradition, doing those very normal things that were 100% normal up until the past 50 years or 60 years, 100% normal. Fasting on Fridays, you know, going to mass every single holy day of obligation, and Sundays, and taking a drive to do it, and dedicating your Sunday to family time, and not mowing the lawn or shopping or doing these other things. And you tell people, they understand, and they start to say, maybe there's something more to this than that I dismissed. So I think it's a good example as well.
Yeah, that's an important point. And it reminds me of Bishop Athanasius Schneider. His parents, um, when the churches were being shut down when he was growing up, they managed to find one, and they came home and told him, "Look, the communists haven't got this one, and it's only 100 kilometers away, and we can make the drive." And that just goes to
You can take
show
a train.
that, yeah, goes to show what the effort was, and they were grateful that they'd found one so close to them. So having an hour's drive, even longer than that, this shouldn't be a big deal. And
Mhm.
the other point I like to bring up often is that young guys were expected to pray all the Psalms over the course of a week in the medieval ages. So a little bit of Bible reading and doing your daily prayers. When you tell people that you do that, you can sound like an extremist to some, but that just shows how far we've fallen from what the expectations used to be and what the normal culture was.
I think Saint Benedict, and you probably read it, and I recommend it to everybody as well. Like, just read the Rule of Saint Benedict cover to cover. It's like you can buy it for 99 cents. Well, you probably download it online completely free right now, easily, and start reading good books and educating yourself. And Saint Benedict, he says you got to just to start, you got to pray 150 Psalms per week. And he calls it out in the first chapter of the book, and it rings true the whole time. And he calls it the battle of obedience.
Mm.
To be obedient to God, it is a battle. I mean, Saint Benedict is saying it's a battle of obedience, and part of that obedience is it's hard. It's hard. It's grinding, but it's worth it. Just like lifting, the obedience comes and the lifting comes, and you have to start somewhere, and you have to start at some time, whether you're 36 or you're 26. And maybe I should have had a buddy that dragged me to mass when I was 22 while I was weightlifting. That would have kept me out of a lot of trouble. I probably would have been married much younger.
The other point I wanted to make about the lifting analogy is that when you first start out, you can make progress quite quickly, but you've said that, as everyone who's been doing it a long time knows, you don't get those beginner gains after you've been at it for a decade or two. And any progress you make is very hard won. And you see that in the lives of the saints as well. So more than anyone else, they're aware of their shortcomings, and they're under more severe attack from the devil the more they advance in sanctity. So just like you have to lift heavier and heavier weights as time goes by and you make less and less progress, there's also this sense that the spiritual life, in a sense, it gets harder. The more holy you become, the more you advance, the greater demands there are placed on yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've noticed, I'm not saying I'm very holy, but just taking those extra steps of making those long drives, getting the kids ready. I mean, just all those tiny little steps that you start to have to take. It's all temptation to say, you know, maybe it's for nothing, right? You're the
Yeah.
devil plays those mind games, right? It says, why don't you just relax this Sunday? Well, why are you getting up so early? And that's I think that's part of it too. And I think a lot of guys like don't see it that way. As those are tiny little temptations to be lazy. Why do you got to go to the gym today? Why do you got to run 2 times this week? Why do you got to go mass every single Sunday and on the holy days of obligation? Why do you got to keep lifting? Why don't you just take it easy? Why are you so disciplined? Why are you so rigid? Like that, a lot of that stuff, I've heard before, and also those are serious temptations to not do it. I mean, it takes a lot of effort as well to go through and do all those things. I mean, I stage my kids' clothes before we go to church on Sunday. Like they know what they're wearing, I know what I'm wearing. We got to get in the car quick. Like it's early. We leave at I hit a 7 a.m. low mass every Sunday. So you have to be ready to walk out the door. And with kids, if those shoes aren't lined up, not good, guys.
Yeah, I know all about that. I've noticed as well, trying to get the whole family praying the rosary every day, building that habit was easy to begin with, but then after you've been doing it a while, you start to get those thoughts creeping in, like, we're really doing this every day? Oh, how about we don't do it today? And you got to overcome that. You got to remember why you set out on the project to begin with and what the point of it is, and then build that discipline so that when you have the doubts, you're trained and you just stick to it anyway. And the doubts might be there, but you don't pay attention to them. Like you say, there's always the whisper, there's always a temptation. Don't bother.
Yeah, there's always the potential of an argument to happen, and for you to sidestep and get into the arguments, whether that's an internal argument or external argument or whatever it might be, just to step in it. And but I think having having the right base, right? You got to build it brick by brick. And I think that's the other thing young guys need to take into account is it's a build your whole life. And that sounds like daunting, but it feels good. It's good. Like, I mean, not like it's a feeling, but I could say, hey, like this was a tough time in marriage, got through it. This was a tough time with lack of sleep, with the new baby in the house, and reading the Bible and lifting at the same time. Like, hey, we did that. Husband and wife, we did this together. We got through these things. We got through, sicknesses. We got through whatever it might be. All these temptations to say throw in the towel, but and the religion gives you the base. The weightlifting gives you the base, but especially strong religion helps you shore up when that temptation does come to just get behind me and just go, and just keep going. And for all those guys that are listening, you got to just start, go, just start. And like, one of my big tips is start now. Like, don't wait till tomorrow. It's such like an excuse. Like, hey, like, oh, I'm really thinking about going to church or, getting into the gym, or just start, just go to church. You'll probably find a church open right now. And that's the truth. Just go. Hey, I knew I got to go to confession. I knew how to get back into the church. And it's the easiest thing to make a million excuses why you can't walk up to the church and walk in and sit down. But, once you're there, it's that first step that sometimes is the biggest. But then you build, and then you could look back on it like I have and say, hey, things weren't really working out well, but brick by brick, I corrected a whole bunch of issues and built it. And now I'm fortified, or I'm stronger, we'll say stronger against temptation and idleness. Idleness is a big thing for me. So I try to make sure I'm not very idle on purpose. But you start shoring up all those issues and kind of almost like building a fortress, for yourself, for your family, and also cultivating inside your family, like the rosary, right? Because you don't know how that's going to translate to your children, and they might be like, why is my dad making me do this? And then they're 25, maybe having a tough time, and they pick that up and they start saying their Ave Marias and get going, and that'll save the day, just because you took that step. Like the same, I think about my father and my mother, and being raised, and there's a lot of things you scratch your head about when you're a kid, but you realize it comes to pay off later on in life. And the same thing with all those steps. Like, in our house, my wife and I gave up watching TV during the week, and then essentially, I mean, we don't even have TV subscription anymore. So like if we kind of watch something together, we'll watch it on a Sunday, and that's not even a guarantee. Or a Saturday, it's not even a guarantee. And inside our house, we also started doing stuff as well. Hey, it's Advent. Let's read stories about Christ and about Mary and Joseph, and you're doing the rosary, and that's awesome. And I'm catechizing my kids at home with the Baltimore Catechism,
Yeah,
and
me too. Yeah.
a lot of the St. Joseph books, which are awesome, the older ones you can get, and just all those tiny little things of, I pray with them every single night. We say our prayers every single night. I've done it even if I'm on not vacation, even if I'm away, like on a business trip, like I've called in. I always make sure to do that and just have that discipline. I think that's a big deal, and to get there, you got to start from square one, which is start with like pretty much nothing.
Those are
Start as
strong
a
words.
church.
Strong words to finish on. Men build, and it's about discipline and sacrifice, doing your duty, even if you're not going to be thanked for it in the short term. You don't know what the habits you're creating might do for people years down the line. Excellent. Thanks so much. I've really enjoyed listening to you. Great advice for people.
I appreciate being on. Thank you very much. I hope it can help some guys out and just so they could just get going and get to build mode.
Yeah, that's important. Get to build mode, get to church first, take the steps. Thanks, Rich. Take care. Stay in touch.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.